The chamber was vast, its walls carved from dark alloy and lit by lines of glowing blue symbols that pulsed like veins. Smoke drifted in lazy streams from vents high above, giving the room a heavy, mysterious air. At the center stood a massive war table, its surface alive with shifting holographic maps and symbols of distant star systems. Around it sat a group of alien soldiers armored in blackened steel, their helmets resting beside them. Their laughter echoed through the hall, harsh and mocking. They were speaking of humans. One of them, broad-shouldered with ridges across his jaw, slammed a clawed hand on the table and barked a laugh. Humans, myths and stories, that is all they are good for. They sing of warriors and heroes, as if words can change what they are: fragile, weak, nothing more than prey. The others joined him, their voices blending into a cruel chorus. The war table flickered, showing outlines of human colonies, old records of battles long past. The aliens barely glanced at them. To them, humans were a joke, a race that told stories because they had nothing else. But another soldier leaned forward, his eyes glinting. Do you remember the tale they tell of the soldier who fought an army with only a blade? Or the one who carried his wounded comrade across a burning battlefield? His lips twisted into a sneer. Legends, lies, stories told to make themselves feel proud. The group laughed harder. Their armor rattled with the sound. Their voices rose, echoing off the metallic walls until the whole chamber seemed to shake with their mockery. But not everyone in the room laughed. From the shadows, at the far end of the hall, a figure sat quietly. He was older than the rest, his face marked with scars that told stories of battles survived. His armor was not polished like theirs. It was scratched, dented, worn from years of real war. His eyes did not shine with arrogance. They burned with memory. He listened to their laughter, their gears, their arrogant voices filling the room. And he waited. One of the younger soldiers, his grin wide and teeth sharp, raised a glass of dark liquid. Humans are storytellers, nothing more. They weave fables of survival, of strength, of victory against impossible odds. But in the real galaxy, myths don't win wars. The others roared in agreement, their claws clapped against the table. The laughter grew until it became almost unbearable. Then the older figure rose, the sound of his armor scraping against the chair cut through the noise. The laughter faltered. The soldiers turned to look at him, their grins fading into frowns of irritation. He stepped forward slowly, his shadow stretching across the war table. The flickering blue holograms painted his face in light and shadow, highlighting the deep scars across his cheek. His voice was calm, but it carried like a blade cutting the air. You laugh at their myths because you have never seen the truth. Behind them, the chamber grew quiet. The arrogance in the room thinned, replaced by something else: curiosity mixed with unease. The veteran stepped closer to the table, his gaze steady. You think their legends are lies. You think they tell stories because they are weak. But I have seen with my own eyes the truth of those myths. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. And I tell you this, every story they tell, every legend you mock, comes from something real. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some exchanged glances. Others smirked nervously, as if trying to cling to their arrogance. The veteran raised his hand and tapped the table. The holograms shifted, flickering to show images of archived battle footage, grainy but unmistakable. Humans, bloodied and battered, standing against overwhelming alien armies. Small groups holding the line against impossible odds. Individuals dragging comrades to safety through fire and chaos. The soldiers stared. One of them tried to laugh again, but his voice cracked. Stories. Nothing more. The veteran's eyes burned. No, not stories. Memories. Histories. Proof. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low growl. You mock their myths because they sound impossible. But that is what makes them dangerous. They do the impossible. Again and again. And when you laugh at them, when you underestimate them, you make the same mistake every empire before you has made. The room was silent now. The laughter was gone. Only the soft hum of the holographic table remained, glowing brighter as if feeding on the tension. The veteran straightened, his presence filling the chamber. You wanted to laugh at human myths, then stay seated. Because I will show you why they are no myths at all. I will show you why the galaxy fears them. Soldiers shifted in their chairs, unease spreading like smoke. Their arrogance had cracked, and though none would admit it, a chill crept into their bones. The holograms flickered again, preparing to reveal the truth. The air grew heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The hook was set. The laughter had ended, and what came next would change everything they thought they knew about humans. The war table glowed brighter as the veteran's scarred fingers moved across its surface. The blue holograms shifted, forming new images above the table. The younger alien soldiers leaned forward, still smirking but no longer laughing. Their arrogance held, but cracks were beginning to show. The veteran's voice was steady, deep, and measured. You think humans are weak because of the way they look, small, fragile, soft. You see prey where there is no prey, but I have seen what lies beneath. Their myths are born from blood, from the kind of will that cannot be explained. The hologram flickered, showing a battlefield. Smoke and fire swallowed the horizon. Human soldiers appeared in the chaos, their armor battered, their weapons outdated compared to alien technology. The younger aliens chuckled quietly. Old footage, one muttered. Outdated weapons, primitive tactics. The veteran turned his eyes to him. Watch closer. The scene zoomed in. A small group of humans huddled behind ruined walls, pinned by fire from an enemy force 3 times their size. Instead of retreating, they broke cover and charged. Bullets cut through the air, plasma fire rained, but the humans pressed forward, screaming as they attacked. Some fell instantly, but the rest fought like demons. They fought until they were on top of their enemies, tearing them down at close range. The aliens in the chamber shifted uncomfortably. There was no hesitation in the humans, no sign of surrender. Their eyes burned with fury even as they fell. Veteran's voice grew colder. They fight knowing they will die. They fight even when victory is impossible. Their myths are not fables. They are warnings. Another soldier tried to laugh, but it came out weak. Suicide. Nothing more. That is not power. That is madness. The veteran's eyes narrowed. Yes, madness. But tell me what is more dangerous in war, an enemy who fears death, or an enemy who embraces it? Silence fell again. The soldiers avoided his gaze. The hologram shifted once more. A city in ruins appeared, flames clawing at the night sky. Alien ships rained fire down upon the streets. The camera moved closer, showing humans running through smoke-filled alleys. They carried children in their arms, weapons strapped to their backs. Some were wounded, but they did not stop. The soldiers in the chamber frowned. They expected to see terror, despair, but instead, the humans turned, placing the children in hidden shelters before charging back into the fight. Farmers, workers, mothers, and elders, none of them trained soldiers. Yet they picked up weapons and fought with the same fury as warriors. The younger aliens exchanged uneasy glances. One finally asked, why? Why do they fight like that when survival is impossible? The veteran's gaze swept across the table. Because to them, survival is not enough. To live without freedom, to exist without defiance, that is worse than death. That is what their myths mean. They are not stories of strength. They are reminders that even in despair, humans will choose to fight. The hologram replayed the scene. A mother shielding her child, firing until her weapon overheated. An old man standing in front of an advancing alien squad, holding nothing but a broken pipe, buying time for others to escape. A boy barely old enough to stand, carrying ammunition for soldiers twice his size. The room was silent except for the low hum of the table. The arrogance in the soldiers' faces was fading, replaced by something harder to hide, unease. The veteran continued. You call it madness, you call it weakness, but in every age, in every war, this madness has carried them to victory against enemies stronger than them. When they fall, they rise. When they bleed, they fight harder. Their myths are not tales, they are reflections of the truth you fear to admit. One of the aliens slammed his fist on the table, trying to regain control of the room. Enough. These are rare moments, exceptions. No species fights like this all the time. The veteran's lips curled into the smallest hint of a smile. No species, except humans. The table flickered again. This time it showed rows of human graves stretching into the horizon. Thousands upon thousands, carved into fields and hills. Above them, humans stood in silence, heads bowed. The image was solemn, haunting. The veteran spoke quietly, but his words carried more weight than any shout. Every grave is a story. Every death is remembered. Their myths are born from sacrifice, and sacrifice is the heart of their strength. The soldiers stared at the endless graves, their laughter gone, their pride shrinking. The room felt colder now, the smoke heavier. The veteran leaned closer, his voice sharp as steel. You mock their legends, but tell me what happens when an entire species treats death not as an end, but as a duty. What happens when every soldier, every mother, every child is willing to pay the price to keep fighting? None of the aliens answered. They couldn't. The hologram flickered one last time. A single human soldier appeared, standing on a hill of bodies. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with blood, but his eyes were alive with fire. Alone, outnumbered, surrounded, and still, he raised his weapon, daring the galaxy to try again. The veteran's voice dropped to a whisper that carried like thunder. That is no myth, that is humanity. The chamber fell into silence. The younger soldiers sat frozen, their earlier arrogance crushed under the weight of what they had seen. For the first time, a seed of fear had been planted. The veteran folded his arms, his gaze hard. And this is only the beginning. The war chamber was silent now. The smoke that drifted from the vents curled low across the floor, as though even the air feared to rise. The alien soldiers sat in their heavy chairs, claws resting on the table, eyes fixed on the shifting blue light of the holograms. The earlier arrogance that had filled the room was gone, smothered by the weight of the veteran's words. He stood tall at the table's edge, his scarred armor gleaming faintly in the cold glow. His voice came again, slow and steady, each word falling like a hammer. You have seen how they fight, but you still do not understand. Humans are more than soldiers. They are storms given flesh. You laugh at their myths because you think they are stories of strength, but the truth is worse. Their myths are stories of defiance. The table flickered again, and new images appeared. This time it was not soldiers, but explorers, men and women in simple suits, stepping onto barren, frozen worlds where nothing lived. They stumbled, they froze, they suffered. And yet they did not stop. They built shelters. They lit fires. They carved out homes in places no sane being would dare call home. The veteran gestured to the holograms. When the void of space told them they did not belong, they did not turn away. They made it does. Their myths of survival in endless winter, of men walking across deserts for days without water, those are not exaggerations. They are truths that repeat, again and again, even among the stars. The soldiers shifted in their seats, uneasy. One muttered, "So they endure. Many species endure." The veteran's eyes narrowed. Do they? Endurance is not what makes humans different. What makes them different is that they endure and then they rise stronger. Every pain becomes a lesson. Every scar becomes a weapon. Their myths are not stories to comfort children. They are weapons sharpened by memory. The holograms shifted again. Now the chamber filled with the roar of war. A battle long past came alive before their eyes. Alien armies marched in perfect order, weapons blazing. Against them, humans scrambled, their lines broken, their numbers too few. The soldiers in the chamber leaned forward, waiting for the inevitable collapse. But collapse never came. The humans fell back, yes, but every step they gave was paid for in alien blood. Even when their defenses broke, even when they were surrounded, they refused to surrender. A single squad held a bridge against an army, firing until their weapons glowed red, then throwing themselves into hand-to-hand combat when the rifles failed. The alien soldiers in the chamber sat frozen. The screams of the humans in the recording filled their ears, not the screams of prey, but of predators that refused to die quietly. The veteran's voice carried over the chaos. This is why their enemies fear them. Humans do not measure victory by survival. They measure it by how much of their enemy they can drag into the grave with them. That is what their legends mean. If they cannot win, they will make sure you do not either. The footage ended with a single human, drenched in blood, standing alone on the battlefield. Around him lay the wreckage of hundreds. His breath was heavy, his body broken, yet still he lifted his weapon. His eyes dared the universe to try again. The chamber was quiet. The alien soldiers did not laugh. They did not even move. The veteran leaned forward, his scarred hand resting on the edge of the table. You thought their myths were lies told to make themselves proud. You thought they were harmless tales. But I tell you this, every myth is a scar. Every story hides a truth they have already lived. And every time you forget that, you give them victory before the battle even begins. One of the younger aliens finally found his voice. It cannot last. No species fights like that forever. Even they must break. The veteran's eyes, cold and sharp, fixed on him. They do break, but when they break, they do not stay broken. They turn their pain into steel. Their myths are not about never falling. They are about rising again, and again, and again, no matter how many times they are struck down. The table flickered one more time, showing ancient footage, blurry and old, but unmistakable. Humans standing in ruins, their cities reduced to ash, yet in the rubble they began again. Children carried bricks, elders planted seeds in burnt soil. Soldiers stood guard while builders raised walls from nothing. The soldiers watching clenched their jaws. Their earlier laughter seemed foolish now, almost shameful. The myths they had mocked no longer seemed harmless. They felt like echoes of a truth that was too dangerous to ignore. The veteran straightened, his presence filling the room like a storm. His voice thundered, calm yet merciless. This is the truth you must understand. Humans are not strong because they never fall. They are strong because falling only makes them rise stronger. That is why their enemies fear them. That is why their myths are not myths at all, but warnings carved into the bones of history. The soldiers sat in silence. None dared to laugh now. None dared to even speak. The smoke in the chamber swirled thicker, heavy with the weight of the moment. The veteran looked at each of them in turn, his scarred face lit by the blue glow of the table. And what I have shown you is only a glimpse. You still believe you know fear, but you do not. Not yet. The holograms dimmed, the room darkened, and the silence pressed down like a heavy hand. The lesson was not over. It had only begun. The war table hummed softly, its blue light dimming as the last images faded into darkness. The chamber was silent, heavy with unease. The younger alien soldiers sat stiffly in their seats, their earlier pride buried under the weight of what they had seen. The laughter that once echoed through the hall now felt like a crime, a foolish noise they wished they could erase. The veteran stood tall at the edge of the table, his scarred armor catching faint glimmers of light. His presence pressed against the room like an unshakable force. He let the silence linger, stretching it until the younger soldiers began to shift nervously, unable to hold their own gaze. Only then did he move his hand, and the holograms bloomed to life again. This time the scene was darker. A ruined city stretched across the projection, its towers shattered, flames reaching high into the night sky. The ground was covered in ash and rubble. The sound of distant screams echoed faintly through the recording. The soldiers leaned closer, expecting to see desperation, collapse, surrender, but that was not what they saw. From the rubble crawled figures, humans burned and broken, their bodies torn by fire and shrapnel. Yet instead of fleeing, they picked up weapons from the dead. Instead of hiding, they ran into the flames. The aliens in the chamber blinked, their claws gripping the arms of their seats. The veteran's voice cut through the silence. This was after their city had fallen, their fleets destroyed, their armies scattered. By every rule of war, they should have surrendered, but humans do not follow those rules. When all is lost, they fight harder. The hologram zoomed in. A human man, his arm gone, dragged himself across the rubble with his remaining hand. His legs bled, his breath came in ragged bursts. And yet, with trembling fingers, he raised a weapon and fired until the enemy fell before him. The soldiers watching shifted, their throats dry. One whispered, "He should have been dead already." The veteran's eyes narrowed. It was, but death does not stop them. They turn it into a weapon. The scene changed. A group of humans hid among the ruins, outnumbered and outgunned. When the alien troops moved closer, the humans did not retreat. They charged head-on, screaming, their eyes burning with fury. Explosions ripped through the ruins as humans detonated explosives strapped to their bodies, sacrificing themselves to drag their enemies into the grave. The chamber filled with silence, heavy and suffocating. None of the soldiers dared laugh. None dared speak. The veteran's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Tell me, what empire can fight such an enemy? An enemy that sees death not as defeat, but as a choice. An enemy that turns the grave into victory." The hologram flickered again, shifting to a battlefield in space. Alien ships moved in perfect formation, massive and armed with devastating weapons. Against them, human vessels darted like insects, smaller, weaker, fragile. Yet instead of retreating, they rammed straight into the alien cruisers, detonating their cores in explosions that tore both sides apart. The younger soldiers flinched as the image shook with fire. The veteran's voice hardened. Every empire that has fought them has learned the same lesson. Humans will always pay the price, even if it costs their lives, even if it costs their world. And they will make sure their enemies pay with them. The chamber's air felt colder now, the smoke thicker. The alien soldiers' eyes no longer held arrogance, they held fear. But the veteran was not finished. His hand moved again, and the hologram revealed another image. This time, not warriors, not fleets. Civilians. Families gathered in the ruins of their homes. Children with dirt-streaked faces clutching broken weapons. Elders standing before burning buildings, defiant even with nothing left. The soldiers stared. Their claws twitched nervously. The veteran spoke slowly, his voice low but unshakable. "You thought their myths were exaggerations, but they are not. When humans tell stories of mothers fighting for their children, of elders holding the line, so the young may escape, of children carrying weapons when all others are gone, they do not speak in symbols. They speak in truth. The hologram focused on a young girl no older than 10, standing in the ruins of her street, holding a rifle almost as tall as she was. She was trembling, her small hands struggling to grip the weapon, yet her eyes carried the same fire as the soldiers before her. The alien soldiers in the chamber looked away. Some could not bear to watch. The veteran's voice turned sharp, cutting into the silence. This is why they are dangerous. Not because they are strong, not because they are many, but because there is no limit to who among them will fight. To be human is to defy. Their myths are not fables. They are warnings written into their blood. The hologram dimmed, and the chamber returned to shadow. The soldiers sat frozen, their arrogance stripped away, their laughter buried under fear. Veteran leaned forward, his scarred face lit faintly by the dying glow of the war table. His voice was quiet, but it filled the chamber like thunder. You laughed at their myths. Now you begin to see the truth. Humanity is not prey. Humanity is the fire that burns even in ash. And when the fire rises, there is no stopping it. The silence was absolute. The younger soldiers stared at him, their pride gone, replaced with something they had never expected to feel: fear. The veteran straightened, folding his arms across his chest. His gaze swept across the chamber. And I have only shown you the beginning. The chamber stayed dark, the smoke curling low like restless spirits. The alien soldiers sat frozen, their once proud posture slumped under the weight of what they had seen. Their laughter was gone, their voices quiet. The air was so heavy with silence that even the hum of the war table felt louder than before. The veteran stood like a statue, his scarred face lit faintly by the pale glow of the holograms. He let the silence linger until the unease grew unbearable. Only then did he speak, his voice low and steady, cutting through the stillness like a blade. You think you have seen enough to understand them. You have not. You think their danger lies only in how they fight. You are wrong. What makes them truly dangerous is not their weapons, not their strength, not even their fury. It is their belief. The soldiers shifted in their seats, claws tapping against the table. One finally managed to find his voice. Belief. Belief does not win wars. The veteran's eyes glinted in the blue lights. No, but belief creates something worse than war. It creates a will that cannot be broken. The table flickered again, showing new images. Not battles this time, not soldiers. Instead, humans gathered around fires, speaking words to one another. They told stories of warriors long dead, of victories earned through sacrifice, of heroes who had stood alone and turned the tide. Their voices carried across the recording, strong, steady, unafraid. The veteran gestured to the projection. This is what you call myths. Tales they pass from one generation to the next. But listen closely. These stories are not about comfort. They are not about peace. They are reminders. They tell their children, their children's children, that no matter what comes, no matter who rises against them, they must never surrender. The soldiers leaned forward, unease creeping into their eyes. The humans in the recording spoke with a fire that seemed eternal. Even in peace, their words carried the weight of battle. The veteran's voice grew heavier. You see myths as lies. They see them as truth, made eternal. They do not forget their scars. They turn them into lessons. They turn them into warnings. Their myths are not fantasy, they are memory sharpened into steel. The projection shifted. It showed humans after war, cities reduced to ash, their people broken. Yet even then they gathered in the ruins, telling stories. A boy sat on the rubble, listening to his grandfather speak of a soldier who had fought until the end. The boy's eyes burned with the same fire as the legend itself. The soldiers in the chamber looked away. They could feel it now, that strange, unshakable thread, running through humanity, a chain of belief that tied the living to the dead, the present to the past. The veteran stepped closer to the table, his scarred hand brushing over the controls. This is why they cannot be erased. Destroy their fleets. They will build more. Burn their worlds. They will rise from ash, kill their armies, and their children will pick up weapons. As long as their myths live, humanity will live. One soldier, his pride not yet fully broken, forced a sneer. Every empire has myths. We all tell stories of strength. What makes theirs different? The veteran's gaze pierced him. Because they believe theirs, because they live them. And when the time comes, they die for them. The holograms changed again. Now the soldiers saw humans charging into hopeless battles with fire in their eyes, shouting words from their myths as if they were weapons themselves. Never surrender. Fight to the last stand when all others fall. The alien soldiers felt the words crawl under their skin. The humans did not just fight with weapons, they fought with belief, with stories that turned fear into fury, despair into defiance. The veteran's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. You think strength is measured by weapons and fleets, but humans measure strength by something greater. They believe in fighting even when they know they will die. That is why their myths matter. That is why they terrify those who face them. The projection slowed, freezing on the image of a lone human veteran standing in a ruined battlefield, his weapon raised, his eyes unbroken. Around him lay nothing but death, yet his face carried no fear, only defiance. The soldiers in the chamber sat still, their claws curling against the table. None of them spoke now. Their pride was slipping away, replaced with the heavy realization of what the veteran was showing them. He straightened, his shadow stretching across the chamber. His voice was steady, filled with cold certainty. Every empire that has fought them thought the same as you, that myths are lies, that belief is weakness. And every empire that thought so left behind only graves. Humanity's myths are not entertainment, they are warnings to anyone foolish enough to laugh. The chamber grew colder, the smoke swirled thicker. The young soldiers' arrogance was gone, their faces pale, their eyes wide. The veteran let the silence return, letting the weight of his words crush what little doubt remained. Then he leaned closer, his scarred face lit by the faint glow of the dying hologram. His voice dropped to a final, quiet growl. You mocked them, you laughed at their legends. Now you know the truth. Myths do not make humans strong. Humans make myths strong, and when they arise, when they carry those myths into battle, no empire in this galaxy can stop them. The silence that followed was unbearable. None of the younger soldiers dared move. None of them dared speak. They sat frozen, haunted by stories they had once mocked but now feared. The veteran folded his arms, his presence filling the chamber like a storm that would never pass. And though the hologram had gone dark, the fire of those human myths still burned inside every mind present, refusing to fade. The chamber was suffocating now, heavy with the smoke that coiled across the floor and clung to the soldiers' throats. No one spoke. No one dared. The laughter that once rattled the war table had been buried beneath the veteran's words, replaced by a silence that cut deeper than any weapon. The veteran stood like a shadow carved from stone, his scarred face lit faintly by the pale glow of the hologram controls. His voice returned, low and steady, each word carrying weight enough to crush what little pride remained in the younger soldiers. You think you understand fear, he said, his gaze sweeping over them. You do not. Not until you have faced a human who refuses to die. With a flick of his hand, the holograms roared to life once more. The soldiers flinched as the new images burned into the air. This was no clean battle, no noble duel of armies. This was chaos, a city consumed by flame, streets filled with rubble, skies dark with smoke. Alien forces marched through the ruins, their banners raised high, and then, from the shadows, the humans came. They did not march in lines. They did not fight in neat order. They struck from alleys, from collapsed buildings, from beneath the rubble itself. One moment the streets were empty, the next they were filled with screams as humans attacked with fury that seemed endless. The alien soldiers watching in the chamber shifted uneasily. The humans moved like predators, using the ruins as weapons. Every wall became a shield. Every shadow became a trap. The veteran's voice rumbled over the chaos. You call them weak because they are small. You call them fragile because their bodies break. But look closer. Their weakness is their strength. Their fragility is what makes them impossible to kill. They bleed, they fall, they suffer, and yet they rise, again and again. The hologram zoomed in. A soldier with his arm torn away still held a weapon in the other, firing until the last enemy fell. Another, pinned beneath rubble, used his final breath to detonate an explosive, dragging enemies into death with him. The soldiers in the chamber could not look away. Their claws dug into the table, unease spreading like fire beneath their armor. The veteran's words cut sharper. You see madness, I see will, an unbreakable will that no empire has ever defeated. Their myths were born from this truth. They are not stories, they are scars burned into their blood. The scene shifted again. Now it was night. The battlefield lay in eerie silence. Alien troops moved cautiously through the ruins, their armor glowing faintly in the dark, and then came the sound. A low chant, voices rising from the shadows. The soldiers in the chamber stiffened as the hologram filled with human war cries. It began with a few, then grew into hundreds. Shouts, screams, roars that shook the very ground. The aliens on the battlefield faltered, weapons trembling in their hands, and then the humans struck, bursting from the shadows like a storm of fire and steel. The younger soldiers in the chamber recoiled, their hearts racing. The sound of those war cries seemed to crawl into their bones, echoing in their skulls. Long after the hologram moved on, the veteran leaned forward, his scarred face half hidden in shadow. That sound is not a myth. It is the sound of a species that has accepted death, the sound of prey that became predator. And once you hear it, once it fills the air around you, you will never escape it. Not in battle, not in sleep. The hologram shifted again. This time it showed not soldiers but survivors. A mother carrying her child through burning streets. An old man swinging a broken weapon at enemies far stronger than him. Children hiding in rubble, their eyes burning with the same fire as warriors. The soldiers in the chamber sat stiff, unable to deny what they saw. The veteran's voice grew colder. This is what you cannot understand. They do not fight alone. They do not leave war to the warriors. Every human is a soldier when the fire comes. Their myths do not belong only to armies. They belong to every man, every woman, every child. That is what makes them unstoppable. The hologram changed again. Space this time. Alien fleets gliding through the void, massive and flawless. Human ships darted between them, small, weak, fragile. And yet they did not flee. They rammed into the enemy with suicidal fury, detonating themselves in blinding explosions that tore through ships, far larger than their own. The chamber filled with silent dread. The younger soldiers' eyes widened as they watched. One muttered, almost to himself, "They destroy themselves." The veteran's reply was sharp, "Yes, and in doing so, they destroy you. That is what makes them feared. They are the only species that will burn themselves to ash if it means dragging their enemy with them. Tell me, what weapon can you build against such will?" No one answered. None of them could. The hologram faded to black. The chamber plunged into silence, the smoke pressing heavier, the silence thicker. The veteran stood tall, his gaze cold as stone. "You mocked their myths," he said softly, almost a whisper. "But their myths are truth, and that truth is this: humans do not stop, not when they bleed, not when they burn, not even when they die. They rise, again and again, until those who mocked them fall silent forever." The words hung in the air, crushing the last fragments of pride in the young soldiers' hearts. None of them laughed now. None of them even breathed too loudly. That the veteran turned, his scarred armor creaking, his voice carrying like thunder. "You have seen the edge of their truth, and you should fear it, because if the ban ever fails, if humanity ever returns unchecked, the galaxy will remember its nightmares." The chamber remained still. The soldiers sat frozen, their arrogance shattered, their hearts heavy with dread. The chamber was darker than before, as if the very walls had absorbed the weight of the veteran's words. The smoke curled in heavy ribbons near the floor, silent and still, while the younger alien soldiers sat motionless in their seats. Their arrogance had long since died, crushed beneath the images they had been forced to witness. Their faces, once filled with smug laughter, now carried only pale unease. The veteran stood at the head of the war table, his shadow stretching across the chamber. His scarred face was half hidden by the faint glow of the dying holograms. For a long time he said nothing, letting the silence dig deeper into their chests. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their claws tapping nervously against the metal table. Some tried to look away, but the weight of his presence pulled their gaze back every time. Finally, his voice came, quiet but sharp as a blade. "You thought their myths were foolish. You thought their legends were lies. Now you know, their myths are not illusions. They are warnings." With a flick of his hand, the holograms returned one last time, the chamber filled with a new vision. This time it was not a battlefield, not ruins, not flames. It was something more unsettling, a human camp after war. Survivors gathered around fires, their faces tired, their bodies broken, and yet their eyes burned with the same fire that no weapon could extinguish. Children listened to stories, repeating words of defiance spoken generations before. Old men spoke of battles long lost, reminding the young that survival alone was not enough. The soldiers in the chamber watched in silence. The scene was not violent, but it carried a weight that crushed harder than blood and fire. The veteran's voice echoed softly. "This is why they cannot be erased. Their weapons can be broken, their fleets can be burned, their worlds can be shattered, but their spirit lives on, carried in their stories. Every myth you mock becomes a seed, and from those seeds grow warriors. Generation after generation." He stepped closer to the table, his scarred hand pressing against its edge. His eyes, cold and sharp, swept across the young soldiers. "Do you see it now? Their strength is not in their bodies. It is not in their weapons. It is in the fire they pass on. A fire that does not die. A fire that only grows." The hologram shifted again. This time it showed a single human veteran, scarred and broken, standing before a crowd of young recruits. His voice carried words from the old legend's words. The cadets in the chamber had already heard, whispered in battle. Never surrender. Stand when all others fall. Fight even when you are already dead. The alien soldiers swallowed hard. The words felt heavier now, no longer echoes of old tales but living truths. The veteran let the image fade into darkness. Only the faint blue glow of the war table remained. His voice lowered to a whisper that still filled every corner of the hall. This is what you must remember. You will face many enemies in your lives, but none like humans, because they are not a people who fight for victory. They are a people who fight because it is who they are. The chamber felt colder. The soldiers' skin prickled beneath their armor. They could feel it now, the truth that had shattered empires. Before them, the veteran stepped back, his presence towering over them like a storm. His final words came slow, deliberate, unshakable. Mock them if you wish. Laugh at their stories. Call them weak. Call them prey. But when you stand before them, when you hear their cries in the dark, you will remember this lesson, and you will pray you are not the one in their path. The chamber fell into silence again. No one moved. No one dared breathe too loudly. The younger soldiers' claws dug into the table, their arrogance broken, their pride crushed, their hearts heavy with a fear they had never known before. The veteran turned, his armor creaking as he walked toward the massive doors at the far end of the hall. His steps echoed slowly, each one a reminder of the weight his words carried. The soldiers watched him go, their throats dry, their minds haunted by the fire in human eyes that refused to die. Just before he reached the doors, the veteran stopped. He did not turn back, but his voice carried one last time, low and final. Remember this night. Remember what you have seen, for it may be the only warning you ever get. The doors opened with a hiss, spilling cold light into the hall. Then they closed behind him, leaving the chamber in heavy darkness once more. The alien soldiers sat frozen, staring into the void, their laughter gone forever. In its place lingered only the echo of a truth they could never forget. Humans were not myths, they were storms given flesh. And the storm always returned.